All right. Well, it was a very interesting day today. I've seen some student work that is really peculiar. I have to say that I've repeated it already 2 times, but I'm going to say for the 3rd, the teachers are good, very good, because you guys did a very good job. If we don't get into details and everything else, I think you are in a very good way of becoming a good lighting designers, because you understood the essence of it, and that's the most important thing. Every single project has a story, and I think lighting and lighting design does tell stories. So talking about my lecture here today, I think what you should do is obviously develop your own philosophy in your work. I think your work is personal. Our work is very much connected to art and technology, so it is up to you to decide which way you are going to pursue in your career, because there are people who are very technical and there are people who are artistic, but I think we have to combine both and know at least something about both, because we are involved in many different aspects of lighting design. We are practically involved in permanent installations. Sometimes if we are invited to do some light art, they're not permanent, but basically this is what we do. We do permanent installations of lighting in the architecture, and architecture consists of many various things. I come from a beautiful place in Croatia. It's a very small country. We have better beaches than you guys here in Spain, and we are very proud of it. This is our office building here, and this is where I learned how to swim when I was a kid. And because my country is, as you know, very small, and it's not, the culture of lighting is not spread enough throughout the world, except in a few countries. We need to talk about light to our clients. We need to talk about light to architects, designers, and everybody who is involved in this. So for that reason, I built this building in 2006 because I wanted to show through architecture, through design, through light, what light is really all about and what we can offer to our clients. That's why this investment was very important for us, so that we can distinguish ourselves from electricians, from electrical engineers, so that people can easily understand what is really a lighting designer doing. Maybe you saw this, maybe you didn't. It's really funny, because this is what they are explaining that we are doing. We are solving a problem you didn't know in a way you don't understand. Well, it is funny, but the one part of this is what worries me still, even after so many years of doing this, is that people do not know that they have this problem. Because it is very difficult for us to have 2 exactly the same rooms. One we lit in a way that we think suits the best the function and the architecture and the function of that room, and then let other people who are not lighting designers doing the same room, so that we can show this to our clients what could be the difference. We never have this chance. So that is why it is very important for us to talk to people and try to explain to general public what is it that we are doing. Because unless the general public requests us, then we will not have a job. So if we try to explain what is it exactly that we do, and I try to put this in 1 meter of the process of lighting design. This, of course, applies not only to lighting design, but applies also to every single creative job, which is architecture, design, and so on and so on. So subject is something that we will all encounter. Subject is something that you are not dealing with while you are in university. It is the object that you are dealing with only through your work, but your work may be or maybe not be realized. It is the formality that you will have to learn in your school, and then you will have to apply throughout your life, the law and order regulations, you guys, obviously, when you were talking about the amount of light that you need to put on the street and so on, you are already aware that this is important. Realization is something that you still did not encounter. I mean, when I'm talking now, I'm talking more to the students that are mostly here present, so that's why I'm talking like that. But everybody who is professional lighting designer in this room knows that all this is very, very important, and this is what you are encountering in your work. Well, in this meter, in this 1 meter, there is this critical creative centimeter, this is the way I call it, that makes the difference between the utilitarian lighting, which is give me amount of light, and lighting design. See, that thing on the bar over there is already not utilitarian, because you don't really need that in order to see. All you need is this. So the difference between these little things and details is what makes the difference between lighting designer and somebody who is giving you just the amount of light. This is something you probably learned in your school. We know the visual pathway. This is something that we are dealing with. We need to know about the non-visual, but usually we are dealing with the visual path here. And if we analyze what that is, and this is, you know, the most important anatomy of visual experience is actually visual orientation. You know, where am I? You know, at night. We're always talking about at night because we are dealing with night. We are night people. Spatial recognition, safety, emotions, mood, sense of direction, and, you know, this one here, which I don't even know why it's here, but it's a human-centric lighting. Maybe you heard about this word, human-centric lighting. Me personally, I think that this thing doesn't really make sense because our job is about humans, and it's also about plants sometimes, and it's also about animals sometimes, but it's primarily about humans. So when we talk about human-centric, it really doesn't make sense to me because it is for humans and always has been for human beings. So the technology allows us to do things we couldn't do before. And we are talking about smart lighting today. I may be a little bit critical about certain things that happens in the industry, but maybe, you know, I will tell you something that will just raise a few questions within the lighting community here. Everything that we put in the light, we call smart light. But the fact is that there is nothing smart about that light. Light is always light. It provides what I said before. So when we put a sensor in the light, when we put the Wi-Fi, Li-Fi, video cameras, all that stuff, it is just an additional function in the lighting fixture. But it doesn't have, in a true sense, anything to do with smart light. Because the only smart light is, in my opinion, dimming. And the control system which provides exactly the amount of light and the direction of light where I need it, according to my mood, according to my need. Everything else is an addition. So there is this little confusion about smart light, which happens to be here. Smart lighting or comfortable people. You know, this is just a little picture. It doesn't mean that it has to be exactly like that. But in a typical office building, for example, in a typical open space office, we have light everywhere because this is what norm is asking us to do. So smart lighting is telling us, okay, if there is nobody here, we should turn these lights off. But if I'm sitting here, how do I feel? Do I feel good sitting in this space? Okay, I'm going to save money, I'm going to save kilowatts, but how am I going to feel, a human being? So if we want to tell that light is or isn't important in the space, you know, these little pictures here are showing us how differently the space looks according to the different type of light, different scene, and so on, and so on, and so on. So we don't have to convince ourselves, especially ourselves, lighting designers, to whom we're mostly talking about light, unfortunately, as I said before, that light is important. You know, this is something that we should tell to somebody else. You know, our job used to be a synergy between architects, lighting designers, and interior designers. It used to be like that. My job today is the synergy between all these different professions. You know, if you want to really do a light, a light installation, or if you are, creating structures in order for them to be illuminated, you do need to communicate, you need to work with all kinds of different people. And these are the people that I work with in the projects that I will show you, very soon. So, talking about bridges and stuff, these are the bridges over the river Sava in Zagreb. This is the capital of Croatia, which, the mayor hired us to do something about these bridges. As you can see in these pictures, most of these bridges practically have no architectural or structural value whatsoever. They are really just a plain extension of a highway. The understructure here and here is really not something that you really want to look at or you want to light up. It's just an extension of a highway. The only exception is this bridge here, and then few of others that are coming and are going to be designed. So from the different, views here, these bridges look like lines. This one is, really nice steel supporting structure. This is a pedestrian bridge. Sorry, I forgot to say, this is for trains, this is for pedestrian, and this is for cars. So they are completely three different functions. But what connects them together is the line. It's the only really thing that brings these two structures together. At least this is what I found out throughout my analysis. Right now, this is what the pedestrian bridge looks like. This is what a vehicle bridge looks like. And this is the view from one or the other. The train bridge is completely invisible because it doesn't have any light on it. Here. So the idea of illuminating the pedestrian bridge was very simple, having light in the railing, enhancing the line completely, enhancing the steel structure that is here, and that the light that you see here is practically only coming from the line illuminating the steel beam, and we want it to look like this at night. This is some technical stuff, how we achieved it. Then we have a vehicle bridge. You see how ugly it is. There's really nothing to it. And when you are on it, you don't really understand that you are on the bridge. But if you notice, the most important visually objects are the poles that provide the street lighting. So when you look at them from this perspective, you see a lot of them, and they look like a very narrow wall. That is why we decided, why don't we use color in this particular case and make these columns that are providing lighting for this bridge something that will be different during, I don't know, Christmas or some special events. And then the only thing that we will do about the line, which I keep repeating all the time, is that we will maybe just use shadow, which will help us do something dynamic, and that shadow is going to travel at the current allowed speed of the traffic on this bridge. So when you are far away or when you are on the pedestrian bridge, the only dynamic thing that you will see is actually shadow traveling through the line of this bridge. All the lighting that is showing the bridge is going to be completely white on all the bridges. And the only moving thing is going to be the shadow, and we will change the color of the poles accordingly depending on, I don't know, some kind of, not every day, but of course according to some kind of festivity or whatever. Then there is a Hendrix bridge, which, as you noticed, has a very 330 meters steel beam and this arch in here, and that makes a difference. This bridge was built for the trains, and we just simply wanted to enhance the existing form, existing structure and detail of the bridge. I'm sorry that resolution is so bad, but you can understand what it is. So regardless of where you are standing and viewing the bridge, you will always see its natural form. You know, we didn't do anything about its form. But because this structure was built for a vehicle that is a train, I thought, why don't we do something about a train? So we put 2 radars on each side of the bridge, which are watching if the trains are approaching or not. So at the moment in which the train approaches the bridge and crosses the bridge, it is the train that actually becomes the protagonist, the actor, and it is the train that becomes the point of illumination. And at that moment, we turn off the bridge, and then we play with the train. This is the actual video, and it looks like a cartoon. So we needed to be very careful about this because the train company is very, very rigorous. So you will notice that the first locomotive is never lit. So we had to calculate exactly the time. When is the locomotive going to pass by, and then ignite the lighting right after it. So this is the dynamic of this bridge, and you know, it was very well accepted by the citizens. You can see these 2 bridges in the back, and they will look quite different once the job is finished, and hopefully this will be done this year, so that we will have these 3 bridges that will communicate through the line, and the shadow that will move with the cars, and everything else is just going to be quiet, showing the original structure of these 3 bridges. Another project which consists of an urban infrastructure is the tunnel that was just recently, it was opened on December 21st of last year. It is the 5.5 kilometers long tunnel under the Istanbul Channel, and it was you know, quite interesting project. These are my friends, architects with which I work with. This is a section, and we have 2 levels. So you have 2 lines going in the one direction from Asia to Europe, and then the opposite direction you are going in the other way. This was a competition between 13 different companies, and I was invited among them to participate. And initially, I really didn't want to participate in lighting the tunnel because I thought, you know, what's tunnel? It's boring. It's just a tunnel, you know. But they said, no, we want to do something different with architectural lighting besides the tunnel lighting that we have to provide. So I said, fine, okay. And then when we went to the first meeting, they said, yeah, but you can only use this. You can't touch the walls. You can't touch anywhere, anything. All your system has to be right here. I said, okay, so that's another constraint, and I was thinking about that for a long time, and then while walking on the street of Istanbul, I noticed that they are selling this amulet, and they are selling these little souvenirs, which is the Fatima's hand. It is something that will protect you, you know, it's like a talisman. So because I had trick at the time, you know, I thought, why don't we reproduce somehow the pattern on the hand and just use the color of this amulet here. So I decided, why don't we use only the blue color with white tricks, trying to reproduce the pattern in the ceiling with different densities. And then, if the budget is too high, which at the end it was, maybe we can only use the tricks to provide the pattern without having the blue light. So we were playing with different densities and frequencies of this light. It was quite difficult to draw and design everything because this was the first proposal, then the budget was this one, and then another budget here. So the budget was actually defining the density of the pattern in the tunnel, which I anticipated, and the idea worked regardless of the budget. You know this picture here, I saw you using it a lot in your project here. we designed a special holder for 3 fittings, because the tunnel goes in the curves and then it goes up and down. So if you want the beams to cross exactly at the center of the ceiling in a tunnel, you had to adjust each one of them as you progress through the tunnel so that you can have the beam exactly in its spot where you want it. So then they said, okay, these are nice renderings that you did, but we want to see this really done. So the 3 finalists were given about 100 meters of the tunnel, and they say, okay, install this, and if it's exactly the way it is in your computer, then you win. So this is the first testing. We used RGB. At one point, we turned off the lights in the tunnel, the street lights, and this looked fantastic. It actually gave us the shape of the windows of the churches and of the Arabic architecture, which is also great. At one point, we said, if we do this, we can have a disco in here instead of cars. And then while we were waiting for the final decision, she is one of the team from Turkey, and she was looking at the coffee. I don't know if you know that. If you have this in here, it's a fortune telling, in Turkish coffee. So she said, are you holding something in your hand? You will win. And we did win, and this is the final realization. And this was a really, really interesting experience. The people we worked with were great, and it was beautiful. So after this was done, they said to me, why don't you give us a solution to illuminate all the roads that are coming towards the tunnel? And by looking at this, these were highways that were crossing in every direction. I said, okay, can you show me how is the entrance, the portal of the tunnel looks like? And they say, well, we don't really have one. I said, why? Because the protection agency, the historic protection agency, didn't accept any of the 7 proposals. So we're not going to have any. We're just going to have a toll plaza where you pay and you go inside. So I told them, I says, well, this is a shame, because this is the first intercontinental tunnel on the planet. And this is a $1.3 billion investment. How come you're not going to do anything that shows, what you really did here? So I said, why don't you do something about that? He says, well, this is not my job. I'm a lighting designer. Well, you give us, an idea, and maybe we'll see. So I said, okay. So we gave them an idea. I sat with my friends, Leonid and Dino, who I'm working with a lot, my friends architects, and we were analyzing how can we do this. We made a proposal to build arches that are crossed in various different directions. This is part of the executive project here. We also used a parametric software to calculate exactly the distance between each one of these beams so they never touch. And from these renderings and these drawings and all the details that we did, they actually built it. And this is the first and others, and then this is the final result of this structure. So you see, as a lighting designer, I was involved in doing architecture at one point, because this is really an architecture and it's beautiful. And the protection agency accepted it right away because it's transparent, you see through it, it's not clashing with other architecture elements of the city. And this was built, and the opening was very successful. And of course, you can light it in any different color that you want, depending on national holidays or whatever. And this is at 106th meter under the surface of the seawater. And this is the really short video that I will show you about this project, which is huge. I mean, this was really, really big. And I have to say that throughout my career, in 30 years, this was my best customer, because they were very, very cooperative, and they respected the idea from the beginning to the end. And of course, there was an issue of the budget, but we try to handle all this together. And I am, very, very proud of this project, and it was great. And these are the people who were cooperating with me through the synergy that I was showing you before. So then another project, which is urban infrastructure again. This is a town, the city of Pula. This is where I live. This is a Roman amphitheater. It's not as big as the one in Rome, but it's still one of the completely standing one. It looks even better than one in Verona and other places. This is a famous shipyard that I will, this project about the cranes and so on. So, this huge roundabout was built because it was supposed to be a highway that goes under it and goes through on the other side. That's why this structure is so big. It is actually so big that the amphitheater of Pula, which is in my town, is actually smaller than that. When you put it inside, it really is smaller. The other thing is that regardless of the size of this land, when you are driving, you can't really see how big it is. You can't see it at all, because the most important thing about this roundabout are all the buildings surrounding your view, because at night you will not see anything here. You will see everything that is beyond. And I think somewhere today in my discussion I mentioned that. So, while you're driving around, basically all the houses and everything that is behind this is something that is more important in view. Even if you put a big Roman temple in the middle, it's not as important because everything else is less important. Another problem that was huge because they did it wrong, it was the flooding. So every time you had a rain, this is what would have happened. So my idea was, why don't we do something that is following the form of the actual roundabout at the height of the driver, so that while you're driving, you can't see anything that is beyond, but it's not very high. What if we collect all the rainwater in the middle and then use it and create some kind of fog all around, which will then be lit, and then the organic form of the fog with the wind will create any kind of imaginable forms that you can have. So this is pretty much the idea. These are the first few renderings. We have 340 poles. Every single one is different. And where the biggest flood was hitting inside, we decided to make a curve here, just symbolically to remind people of what it used to be. And these are a few renderings. And this is actually the first photo. And after it was almost completed, we had huge floods again. I mean, rain, as you can see here, but it didn't flood, so it was quite successful. Then, as a decoration, I used the famous Via Bizzuno Maxi Poppies here. And now I will show you how it works. So you see, everything in the middle is just a technical structure. It doesn't need to be, you don't have to have, grass, plants, anything. You just retain huge amounts of water in the middle, and everything that you see, and it's important for the viewer, is actually outside. So this is while you're driving during the day. As you can see, you can't see beyond, even if it's completely transparent. And the fog that we create here is pretty much contained within a few meters of the structure, and it creates these strange, unexpected forms with the wind. Then, of course, when we need it, we can play with color and stuff. You see all the structure that is inside here? Video stopped for some reason, I don't know why. Dead. What? Something died, I'm sorry. Okay. So you see, this is, again, not really a lighting designer's job to do something like this. But, I say quite often, I do offer many times to the clients something they didn't really ask me to do. But if they like it, they're always willing to, pursue the idea and to go forward. Anyway, so you can see in these few projects in here that light does live in many forms, and our profession apparently also. And we need to... How could I put this up and continue with this? So, I don't know if you noticed so far, but I kind of follow the form of the bridges with a line. I kind of use the vertical poles of the street lights also for some kind of effect with lighting. I follow the simple form of the bridge for the train, and then I follow the train. So practically, in my opinion, is that once you understand that light does have a form, you note how much this form is going to influence the form that you are illuminating. It's a kind of philosophical thing, but it makes sense in a way that, you know, if you, for example, didn't use a line of light in that bar over there, but you use spots, those spots would have a round form. That round form is visible to your eye, even if it's not tangible. You can't touch it, but it's visible. You see it. So if you use something round, you will practically deform the linear horizontal two lines that you have on that bar. And this is something that we should be careful about when we are lighting up structures, objects, or buildings. So I'm going to show you a few other completely different projects. This is one recent one that we just did a few weeks ago when we had to light up the old castle. This is a very old medieval, very romantic little town in Croatia. And you can notice that even if you're looking at from above, or if you are looking at from the ground, I didn't want light to be more important than the castle. I also purposely positioned the light so that there is a shadow here. I also wanted the shadow behind the tree here, and some shadow here. This is all done on purpose, because if we just flood it from everywhere, then you lose the sense of the texture and you lose the sense of the actual form of this building. Same with this church. You see, all the light is coming from behind this building here in the same direction, so that we can have the slight shadow here, so that you recognize at night also, as you are during the day, that this detail of these columns and the beams in architecture are there, and they're actually standing out from the building. So the only thing I'm doing here is I am actually showing what already exists. You know, I'm not trying to make something out of it that it's not. So this particular case is also the same. This is a Palazzo Te in Mantova, and we did just the same as we did in that place over there, except one thing. This used to be an island. So I proposed, why don't we use blue color here when the tourists visit this palace, so you can turn it on, the guide can turn on these blue lights when he said, you know guys, this used to be an island. So he can turn on the blue light, and then after they are gone, he can just switch back to the regular white light that this building is. And the only thing we are showing, because this is the first Manneristic building ever built in 1525, we are enhancing the texture of the stone everywhere. And that's, you know, we are doing this by having the lights closer to the building so that you can have, you know, very strong shadow and the texture of this Mannerist architecture from the... So, form follows the object. Yes, this is another case where form of the light is following the form of the object, as you can see. This is GUM in Red Square. So if someone, you know, is reading this, you know, he says, well, Dean, I did follow the form of the object. What do you want? But this is not really what I'm intended. You know, what I'm intended is this, because this is my idea of how this building should look like. And this is something we did with trick. So we didn't use any linear lighting here. It was all done with trick, positioned in the right place, like here, 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 and up here so that we can have all this effect without putting the usually linear lines and so on. So talking about cities and the infrastructure and everything that we are doing about the cities today, you know, this is actually our reality. I noticed last night that there is not that much facade lighting in Barcelona, which is good because, you know, city is an environment of total randomness. It's becoming today something that nobody almost has control over it. Maybe in Barcelona it is, I don't know, but I've seen many cities, including London, that lighting is completely ruining the scenery of the city during the night. You can't really see much except lights. You know, we're putting all these huge media facades on the buildings. You know, this is what, this is actually good in Hong Kong. But you know, there are places that are really completely weird, like this one here. Can you recognize any of these buildings? No, you can't. You know, because the building is not important here. You know, I own this building. I am the owner. I have the money. I can do with it whatever I want. So I'm going to make this a huge video screen. There's nothing you can do about it. So I'm going to hire not a lighting designer, because lighting designer will not do stuff like this. I'm going to hire a guy who sells, you know, media, LED stuff, panels. And I'm going to put thousands of them here, and this is what my city at the end is going to look like. So, you know, I think that very soon the time will come when non-lit building in certain cities will look much better than the one that it's lit. So when they ask me, how would you approach lighting a historic building comparing to a modern building? And I said, you know, this question really doesn't make any sense. Because lighting up a building or architecture depends on the context also, depends on the type of architecture, its typology, depends on many things, but also on the context in which building is. Because if my building is in between overly lit buildings, I'm going to leave it black, and then it's going to stand out. So thinking about what I'm saying, that maybe this is a utopia completely because we have no control over this kind of stuff. Maybe it's not. You know, sometimes we have the opportunity to apply certain things because, you know, in a very simple way of explaining this, you know, public space and private space are mixed very much together. There is very difficult to distinguish today one from another because as soon as I walk out of my building, I'm in a public space. But my building is touching a private space. So where is this boundary? And how do we approach it? You know, we need to think about rhythms, postures, and poses, and then the experiential space mostly, the holistic approach. You know, what am I seeing? Like I told those guys today, I can't see them. You know, what is behind your bridge? What is on the left? What is on the right? Because, you know, light travels infinitely. It never stops until it hits an object. So if I turn on the light in my terrace, that light in my terrace is going to travel so far until it hits your terrace in your high-rise building here, and the vice versa. So light doesn't stop until you really stop it by something solid. So if I'm thinking only about my terrace, only about my street, it's not really the right thing to do. I think that we should, you know, this is a simplified version of that because we need to consider interior versus exterior. You know, this light here is influencing the street. The street light is influencing the interior here. So everything is connected with light. You know, then exterior versus surrounding, meaning I'm going to light up my garden. But what is beyond my garden? It's somebody else's garden. It's a street or a park or public space. I don't know what it is. But if I'm only considering just this little narrow space where I am at, then this project may not be well done for somebody else who lives far away. Because if I want to light up this little vase from my living room and I point the projector in the vase and I love it, but then 55 meters away there is a bedroom of my neighbor and that reflector is just right in his eye. So see, these are things that, sustainable and adaptive lighting design strategy through the methodology that we developed, which tries to identify 4 most important things by knowing the typology of architecture, knowing the new typologies that will be created at night only with light, and then the connective tissue between all of them. And then you have a holistic approach. How is going to be the contour of the object at night that I am lighting? How am I going to relate to my neighbors? What about landscape relation? What about atmosphere that I'm going to create there? These are the most important questions when you begin doing your lighting design. So we, unfortunately, are not going to have many opportunities in our career to practice this, because we can't control what other people are doing. But maybe one day somebody is going to give us an opportunity to work on many different buildings, somewhere that you are actually doing all of them. You're doing all the buildings, you're doing all the landscapes, you're doing all the public spaces and all the private spaces, and this is fortunately something that happened to me a few years ago in this beautiful island where a guy who is, wealthy bought everything. He owns everything. Hotels, villas, beach, he owns everything. And he hired me to do everything. So this is the bay, and this is the analysis of what you saw before. So that methodology took into account the object contour of each single one of these different areas and different buildings. Then we analyzed what is going to be the neighbor relation, because in here you have a very private spaces, very private, that are touching the public space. So I'll show you later how that works. So one example is the Villa Hortensia. This is the one. You can rent it for about 75,000 euros a week. You can bring all your friends there. You have 24-hour service and so on and so on. So here is your pool, and this is where you would like to relax at night. I didn't give you any light in this building. I just gave you a contour of the typical detail of this architecture. I actually used the light through the landscape to give you a little bit of the shadow on the facade. I gave you this lamp here so that you can feel like you are in your own private living room. But the fact is that you are very near public space. But you still feel in here that nobody can see you, even if during the day everybody can see everybody. So this is what you can control practically with light. It's a completely different thing when you're talking about hotel. This is more urban, this is more open, but still the landscape outside the pool is influencing the scene in the pool during the night, as well as the interior towards the exterior. So this is, thinking about the holistic approach. And this was a risk that I took by disputing the norms, meaning that you all guys know that this pathway here is maybe S1 or S2 category. Okay, I need to provide a certain amount of looks, a certain amount of candelas, whatever, but in this particular case, I didn't. I used the light to give you your perspective is lit. You see, here I lit the vertical surface, the horizontal surfaces, which are all away from your pathway. This is not lit at all. I gave you a few indications in here with the direction of the walking. So I was waiting for a power company or someone to say, hey, Dean, we want to measure the light, but you don't have enough light here. You have to do something about that. It didn't happen because they didn't notice. Because, see, these lights here, this is what it used to be. The most important thing about this picture here, about this lighting, is actually the lighting. The important thing about this picture is not lighting, it's the tree. It's the green stuff, it's the shore, it's the shadow. This is what it's important. See, this is the difference. This picture here, when you frame it, it's quite big. You have vertical, you have horizontal. In this picture here, you just have a dot and a little spot here. We are changing all this next year, hopefully. So We did all the landscape lighting there. We did all the interior lighting and everything. And this is the most important picture for you to explain to you what I'm talking about. So we have light. You see the light here and here. On this pathway, on the stairs. There is also light in here. On the trees, on the house, we have these three puppies as a sculpture. You can see that the light is actually touching the water here and this part and this, but you can't see where all this light is coming from because the fittings are absolutely not important, and they shouldn't be. It is the final effect, what they are doing, that is important. And then sometimes, you know, like I noticed that some of you are heading in this direction today. Sometimes you have an opportunity to do something that is weird, and you have fun, because we should have fun in our job. When they asked me to do something about this pier, one morning I came and I said, you know, guys, why don't we build these big 12-meter high poles that resemble a huge shell that we have in our sea. Then through these poles we can, you know, laser cut the pattern which will create some kind of shadows on the floor. Then we will have the line of light following the steps, getting into the water, having the luminous roots, and then we have 14 medusas, jellyfish floating in the water. Now they said, did I smoke pot that morning? You know, I says, are you crazy? Anyway, when I present this to the investor, he said, look, Dean, this is a totally crazy idea. You know, I will pay for it. But if it doesn't work, you know what you can expect. So anyway, we did it. We built these poles. And this is me adjusting the fittings there. We did build this. This was a very, very difficult thing to do. We did design those jellyfish, and we did turn on these lights, and I am adjusting. This is me diving here. And it looks great. And this pier became a gathering place, which I will show to you later. So then again, sometimes we have the opportunity to do something, as I said earlier, that it's not really something permanent, you know, or it is permanent, but it's not functional utilitarian lighting, you know, and this is the case of the cranes in the shipyard in Pula. This shipyard is 160 years old, and these cranes are actually the symbol of the town. And 20 years ago, I came up with this idea, and a few years ago, this idea was realized. And every year when we have a festival of light, then we synchronize 5-6 minutes of music with the dance of the light with those 8 cranes. And you see, these are the pictures that I've been collecting from various photographers. This was done 3 years ago when we had a disco version of Riders of the Storm with the cranes, and it was a big storm that night, so it was very funny. This is the University of Electronics in Zagreb, which I was asked to do something about lighting here. So I, again, did something that really isn't only lighting. I thought, why don't we do something that will represent, as an artistic sculpture, what's happening in this building, what these guys are studying, and let's make something, you know, black on this facade, and then at night, you know, we can have this kind of games and, you know, showing what these kids are actually learning in that building inside. Then this is an idea of entrance of the big, beautiful tourist resort in town. Unfortunately, only this was realized, the tree, and see, this is the picture. This is the rendering, and this is the picture, and it was done exactly to my sketch. This is something that will be turned on tomorrow at 6:30 in the evening. I call this ego trick. It is a representation, a little kitschy representation of a chandelier. You see, I put the chandelier in this a golden egg. You know, I'm protecting it. I'm showing it as a piece that is extremely important. I'm doing this because chandelier used to be the only decorative lighting that we knew in certain ages. We didn't have, you know, all the other variations of decorative lighting sometimes. We have a ceiling light like this one here, you see, and then we had our candles. So by using trick, you know, I decided that we can have these different effects. Later, I will show you a video. Not even investors saw it yet. Then in lightscape lighting, I did this crazy sculpture here also in one park. This is a twisted pavilion also for the light festival. We're having this weird, almost circular structure that light is also moving in every directions, and we are putting fog inside. So, with light and fog, you really lost the direction and the sense of space. So it was kind of interesting. Plus, it was weird music, and we also installed it in front of the Pula's amphitheater. And it was quite fun, I have to say. So, anyway, this is about my projects, and I would like to conclude with the ILD domains and practice of architecture lighting designers, in which, in a few words, they are explaining what our job is really all about. And everything about this is great. You should guys read it. It's on their website. The only thing that I am complaining about here is that the human experience is at the bottom. I think that this should be here, and then everything else after that. And if you didn't read A Fountainhead, I strongly suggest that you do. This is a book written by Ayn Rand in early 50s, and it was a movie that was done in 1958 about this book. And, she's a very smart lady. I really like to read her books and what her thoughts. She's a very influenced philosopher of the 20th century. And this is the one that applies to us and to everybody else. We can avoid reality, but we cannot avoid the consequence of avoiding reality. So after this, I like to show this picture here. I don't know if you know what this is. I'm not going to make it any longer. This is actually a natural phenomenon, and this is my friend Leonid. This is the guy who was doing the tunnel with me in Istanbul. And this is a natural phenomenon that happens in rare occasions if you are very high in the mountains, when there is a fog in front of you and a sun behind you, and you can have this type of effect. And you are very, very lucky if you ever seen this in your life. And this is what happened to him. And of course, he was taking pictures and videos right away, sending it to me. And I was jealous that I didn't actually, have this experience. But later on, we were discussing about this. I said, my God, this looks like, a Mary or a Jesus. So I don't know. Who knows what anyone would do about this. So the reason why I showed you that picture before is maybe you will ask yourself, wow, maybe, somebody really thought that this was some kind of saint or some kind of who knows what, godly thing. Because, understanding the form of consequences bring great responsibility to all of us, simply because lighting is not important for architecture, but for the people that live in it. I said that many times today. Because what I like to say about this video here is that, in my opinion, light lives in 5 forms. One is the fitting and the source. Second one is the form of the light itself, which is invisible completely, but it does have a form. Then is the form of the object that we are illuminating. The fourth one is the shadow. And each one of them together are important for us to see. But the fifth one, which is the most important of all, is the form of consequence. Because it is the consequence of lighting that brought these people here to sit near this lighting installation here. It is the lighting of the cranes that brought 15,000 people together one night to watch this show in here. And it is this happy kid that was very much enjoying being in the Twisted Pavilion there. So that's really our job. It is the consequence of our job to make people happy in where they live. And that's it. Thank you.